can't believe this. I can't tell you anything. Every time I tell you something, everybody else knows about it. No, I'm mad.
What is up, everybody? It is Brandon coming at you live from Smith's Grove, and today I'm covering one of my favorite movies of all time, Twister, released in 1996 and directed by Jan de Bont. So Twister is what we call an epic disaster film or event film, but it has it all: action, drama, suspense, horror, comedy, romance, and the most outlandish storm chasing lingo ever.
Those tops have got to be spiking about 40,000.
West, northwest, look at mid-levels for rotation and increase the PRF.
Yeah, it's definitely a sidewinder.
Look at the surf coming off those fields.
Shit, horizontal raid. Hang on.
The finger of God.
This sucks up.
I don't even know how much of this shit is real, but damn it, it's fun. Twister was produced by Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment and actually received financial backing from both Universal Pictures and Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was given distribution rights in North America, with Universal obtaining the international rights. Steven Spielberg was also attached to direct the film, but opted for a producer role instead. Spielberg did, however, reach out to Jurassic Park writer Michael Crichton and his wife Anne-Marie Martin to write a script for Twister. Fun fact, Anne-Marie Martin actually played Wendy in the original Prom Night and also an uncredited role in Halloween 2. It didn't stop there, however. Although Crichton and Martin wound up with the writing credits, the script actually went through several rewrites, including changes made by Buffy the Vampire Slayer creator Joss Whedon, who didn't get a credit at all if I'm not mistaken. The director chair for Twister goes to Jan de Bont, a Dutch filmmaker that had already worked as director of photography on films like Die Hard, Hunt for Red October, and Lethal Weapon 3. His first huge hit as director came in 1994 with Speed. So with his experience and success for disaster and action films already, he seems kind of like the best choice if Spielberg was out. It is also worth noting too, though, that several other big name directors were in talks before de Bont came in, and that's including Terminator director James Cameron and even Tim Burton. Casting for the film includes a wide number of A-listers mixed with some not so A-listers, but all of them play their role extremely well and really give this movie its charm. The role of Bill Harding was originally set to go to Tom Hanks, but thank God that didn't happen because it went to the legendary Bill Paxton instead. For the co-lead role of Joe Harding, Mad About You actress Helen Hunt gets the role. Jamie Gertz from Lost Boys fame plays Bill's fiancée Melissa. Princess Bride star Carrie Elwes plays the antagonist Jonas. Alan Ruck plays Rabbit, and Philip Seymour Hoffman plays Dusty, who next to Bill is everyone's favorite. Fun fact about the Dusty character: country star Garth Brooks was supposedly up for the role of Dusty, but turned the role down because he didn't want the tornado to be the bigger star of the movie. Now, this is an alleged claim by a former business partner during a lawsuit, but damn it, that shit's funny. She also accused Garth of turning down a role in Saving Private Ryan because he didn't want to share the limelight with Hanks or Matt Damon. Look, I don't really know about all that, but there is one thing that I really do need to know. Where are you keeping the bodies, Garth? Where are they? The one good thing to come out of the Dusty character, though, is that Jack Black actually had something to base his work off of for the next 30 years. Rounding out the cast, we have Sean Whalen, Jeremy Davies, Lois Smith, Joey Slotnick, Scott Thompson, Zach Greiner, Todd Field, and last but not least, Wendell Josepher. All do an exceptional job in this movie, and I truly believe that every one of these cast members are the glue that holds this wild-ass film together. Filming began in May of '95 and was originally supposed to take place in California and even the United Kingdom. De Bont insisted, however, that the film be shot on location in Oklahoma because he felt that it could be the last great action movie not shot on a soundstage. Now, although it's reported that he was a major dick on set to some crew members and even downplayed some of Helen Hunt's injuries sustained during filming, I'll at least give him credit for this one. The use of practical effects mixed with CGI instead of all just CGI is commendable, and still welcome after the shit we get today with the overly produced and animated stuff in studio. The location shots also help retain a sense of relatability and realism to the movie's plot, which is a big reason why I think this movie still stands out above all the other disaster movies that came after. Major locations for the movie include Fairfax, Ralston, Norman, Call Lake, and Guthrie, Oklahoma, to name a few, with the latter being the location for the drive-in theater, which was real and operational. The real-life town of Wakita was also used, and they actually demolished an older part of the town for the F4 aftermath scenes, using old tornado damage survey photos as reference. The only major scene not filmed in Oklahoma were scenes during the F5 climax, which was shot almost entirely around Eldora, Iowa. If for some reason I pronounced one of these names wrong, I'm sorry. Don't bite my head off. Despite the bumpy road the movie had during filming, whether it's being halted due to the Oklahoma bombings in '95 or various other outbursts and injuries on set, and supposedly supposedly Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt not getting along at all, Twister was finished and released on May 10th, 1996, with a budget around $90 million, and the summer blockbuster sucked in a whopping $495 million at the box office, coming second on that year only behind another popular but very different kind of disaster film, Independence Day. Also, if you haven't purchased or downloaded the official soundtrack to this movie, you really should do so. Absolute bangers on there, especially Goo Goo Dolls and Van Halen. And I can't lie to y'all, I love this movie very much, but despite that, I do recognize that it has some faults and some major cheesy elements to it. So without further ado, let's take a look inside the Suck Zone at one of my favorite movies of all time, Twister. The movie opens up with a title card and some scary music that terrified me as a kid watching it. Even now it's pretty chilling, to be honest. We get another title card showing us it's 1969 and storm clouds are a-brewing, complete with animal noises mixed in for tornado sounds. Which is pretty damn over the top and retarded when you think about it. But I guess if you want to give the weather, which is very much a character on its own, a voice, yeah, I guess why not? For the animal sounds that they use, it's not lions, tigers, and bears oh my, instead it's lions, tigers, and camels?
Wow.
The storm quickly descends on the Thornton family as Joe's mom grabs her to head to the storm cellar. About the time the family and little dog Toby reach the cellar, the tornado strikes. Joe's dad somehow thinks it's necessary to protect his family by holding on to the cellar door that quickly is compromised by the powerful winds of the tornado.
It's the Suck Zone.
You know, maybe that wouldn't happen if it wasn't held in place by a bolt lock that my cat could bypass in 5 minutes. After a few moments of struggle, the door is ripped into the sky and Joe's poor daddy is sucked into the monster tornado as Joe and her mom scream in fear, and we fade into the morning light to see the damage left behind. Why this dumb shit held that door is beyond anybody who's seen this movie at this point. I mean, I kind of get that they needed a story for Joe in this movie, but it wasn't needed at all. I mean, her mom and her were just fine. Either way, it does show that this movie is going to have its dark moments, and I'm ready for it. We fast forward to present day to some folks at the NSSL very briefly setting this up for the film's events, letting us know it's about to be a long day. We're then taken to the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, with a beautiful tracking shot following the truck I wanted as a kid after watching this movie. You see, kids, product placement does work. And there he is, the handsome devil himself, the extreme Bill Harding. Crosshatch jacket and all. You know, when people think of Bill Paxton, they probably think of some of his more colorful roles like Weird Science or The Terminator or True Lies. Not me. I think of Twister. That dude actually plays a very serious and badass lead role in this. Along with his new fiancée Melissa, they're on their way to get the supposedly signed divorce papers from his now estranged wife and old chasing partner Joe. They track Joe and the crew down to some field getting ready for the day's scientific activities, and it's here you meet most of the colorful cast of misfit amateur storm chasers, including Rabbit and Allen,
Roll the maps.
Belzer and Haynes,
Where do you want it, Joe?
Looks like the dry line is
Lawrence, Preacher, and Joey, and the barn burner driver himself, Dusty. After Dusty establishes himself as the weirdest one there almost immediately, Bill does what anyone would do and leave his soon-to-be bride, who is totally out of her element with this crazy guy.
The Suck Zone, basically, at which the Twister sucks you up.
After Bill makes sure to drive the point home that he's not back, he finds Joe to get those papers so he can get the F out of there. Joe, who we find out has not signed the papers, has secretly lured Bill there so he can witness a prototype launch pack he designed, properly named Dorothy, for its first field test. And inside holds hundreds of these little sensors, and when released into the tornado, will transmit back on wind speed, pressure, and dew point temperature. I love that they reference the Wizard of Oz in this movie too. For those of us out there that were born before these disaster films came out, chances are the very first time that you've ever seen a tornado in a movie was probably Wizard of Oz. And honestly, I think that tornado in that movie still looks amazing to this day, and it scared the absolute shit out of me as a kid. I also think it is a nice touch that the very first tornado that they chase in this movie is a very similar looking tornado to the one in Wizard of Oz. Of course, to explain all this exposition about the instrument pack, they use Melissa to simultaneously tell her and us what the hell is going on, and you see how impressed she is. The idea for them is to install earlier warning systems to get people to safety quicker during tornadic storms. But also for these wild-eyed field scientists, the thrill of the chase is also a good way to get those endorphins pumping.
It's the Suck Zone.
After a brief lesson, they get an update from the NSSL that shit's about to go down, so they load up, but not before some of that amazing-ass dialogue.
It's fatty time!
time!
This shit is only the beginning, so tighten your seatbelt. After they take off, Melissa and Bill realize they don't have the signed papers and chase after them. It takes about 5 seconds of them following for Bill to decide he wants to check this Dorothy thing out, so he tells Melissa to head back to the house. Unfortunately for her, her curiosity gets the better of her and she decides to tag along. It's also here when we get to meet Jonas and his crew of corporate chasers led by Carrie Elwes.
Jonas, son of a bitch.
I'll level with you. Big corporations and government absolutely sucks. Can't trust any of them.
Contractor, no. I will not bow to any sponsor.
That said, most of the scientists and storm chasers have some sort of funding available to them because whatever they need to measure data out in the field and all that equipment is way too expensive not to have funding of some kind. It has to come from somewhere. I do get the sentiment here though, because Jonas is still a snake in the grass and a complete asshole to boot.
Maybe I'm wrong on this one, but for me, the beast doesn't include selling out.
Speaking of assholes, the barn burner of that crew decides to blatantly run Bill off the road for some reason, so we'll have to hold off on that tornado action for just a few minutes longer. While they stop to get his tire fixed, we find out why Jonas is actually there and what kind of weasel he is.
You stole my design, you son of a bitch!
You see, it doesn't matter if he's funded. He stole their design. We also establish a little love triangle tension here between Melissa and Joe in the diner.
You're still in love with him, aren't you?
See, I told you this movie has something for everybody. While Bill is outside collecting his thoughts, he starts checking the dirt and reading the sky. We are established in this motherfucker right here is like the modern day Pecos Bill or some shit. This dude can read the weather better than I can read an instruction manual. And you know what? I think it's time for some more of that fire-ass dialogue.
Going green. Greenwich.
Don't you wish you could have been as cool as Bill was? I know I do. The crew heads out, so Jonas and his crew follow suit. I also have to mention here that Bill is constantly putting Melissa anywhere besides where he is in this movie. Like once he's on the road, tornadoes are his full priority. I never said the dude was perfect. While arguing in the truck about Bill's temper and whatnot, we get our first glimpse of a tornado, so you know what that means.
It's fatty time!
We also get some more of that glorious product placement here.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
Joe almost immediately questions Bill's manhood, so to prove himself, he does exactly what she wanted and drives off into the ditch line.
Tighten your seatbelt.
And almost immediately, they regret their decision. After realizing that they're in deeper than Sum 41, the only way out is basically to plow into that wooden bridge ahead of them and take cover underneath. Now, I don't recommend trying this at any point in time, as they've already debunked getting under bridges and underpasses during tornadoes, but for this movie, it works out fine for them. Also, that tornado being strong enough to throw a tractor and a truck would have definitely took them for a ride too. After the tornado moves past the bridge, it conveniently ropes out so that our characters can regather their thoughts and their belongings.
Where's my truck?
Damn, Melissa, did you just miss that truck?
That's awesome! That's awesome! Melissa!
Well, with Joe's cool Jeep truck out of commission, I guess they just decided to leave that shit in the middle of the road alongside a free camper shell for some crackhead to come along and steal for scrap. As quick as you can say,
It's fatty time!
we're back on the road.
We're going again.
Again, but back there you almost got yourself.
No.
That's right, Melissa. You didn't know that he was the fucking extreme, did you? You know, most women would find that attractive. Speaking of not knowing, did you guys know Gary Busey's son, Jake Busey, was in this movie? I was today years old when I realized this, and I have seen this movie like no less than 1,000 times. Well, our favorite storm chasers have caught the Nightcrawler crew just in time for the next tornado, and in case you thought that this dialogue hasn't been wild enough, then you're in for a treat.
What? Look at the surf coming off those fields.
Shit, horizontal rain. Hang on.
Bill, I've never seen clutter like this.
I don't think anybody has.
Bill, we're in the core.
I gotta go, Julia. We got cows.
Like no one knows what the fuck is happening, but it sounds so crazy and intense. I love it. As Joe and Bill punch the core of the storm, they wind up at Karl Lake, where 3 tornadic waterspouts all surrounding the protagonist converge into the truck, spinning it multiple times, but never getting it airborne. You know why? After celebrating their intercept, Bill has to check on Melissa, who's in shock and who he once again completely forgot about. The rest of the gang also doesn't seem to give a shit because all they can think about is bumming a meal off of Joe's Aunt Meg.
Food!
Joe gets outvoted and we get one of my favorite scenes in this movie. Everybody is just chilling out and sharing stories, acting wild. I think you can really tell here that the chemistry of this crew was off the charts. It feels like you're sitting in the room with them. If only I had one of those steaks and some eggs right now. We find out Joe is still actually in love with Bill, to no one's surprise, and we also find out why they call Billy the Extreme.
Because Billy is the extreme.
He strolls up to the twister,
He says, have a drink. And he chucks the bottle into the twister, and it never hits the ground.
Bill sounds like he used to be pretty out of control. He seems so level-headed and calm now, it's kind of hard to believe.
See, there was another Bill, an evil Bill, and I killed him.
Oh, never mind. The crew gets a call on the radio about a brewing storm and rushes out. Did they just leave that place for Meg to clean up? What the f***? Now I need to point out how badass I think this scene really is. You have a full-on orchestra version of Van Halen playing during their drive. And then they hit that detour and take a walk in the woods, and it transitions into the full band version.
Detour, we're gonna take a walk in the woods.
And that's such good shit. If you don't like that, are you even a human's being? See, Sean Whalen gets it. Melissa not so much. After destroying a shit ton of corn and almost wrecking into Jonas's crew, they wind up in, wait, what? Texas? What the f***? So I guess the editors dropped the ball on that one. I can't remember what the story was behind this, but I imagine it was B-roll footage used from chase season, which explains this scene and why the terrain seems to change so much. The tornado finally rears its ugly head, and this encounter is the craziest one so far. Not only is it jumping, but you've got hail, power lines, trash, tricycles, boats, and hose, and to make it worse, Jo insists on trying to get herself killed by her own obsession. After the tornado runs the tailgate and wastes the pack, Bill finally calls out Jo in a good scene where he basically tells her to stop living in the past and admits more or less that he still wants to be in her life.
Joe, things go wrong. You can't explain it. You can't predict it.
Unfortunately, the radio picked up everything too, so Melissa and the rest of the crew heard every single word. Poor Melissa. That night at a nearby motel and drive-in area where there's a spooky double feature playing Psycho and The Shining, the crew's regrouping and getting some coffee. And for some dumb fucking reason, after Bill has already confessed all this shit to her, Jo has finally decided to sign the divorce papers.
Ain't that a B?
Like, this is what you wanted and now you're letting go? That's like flirting with a dude all night, and when he finally asks you out, you admit that you have a boyfriend. Playing these damn games. Y'all are sick.
I can't talk about it anymore. It's giving me a headache.
Here, take 2 of these.
Ah, new print. Little. Yellow. Different.
In case you were tired of this episode of The Young and the Restless, this movie reminds you that you're also kind of in a horror movie too. This movie's a lot like Missouri weather. It changes from 1 minute to the next. Jesus, it's hot out there right now. The TVs start to get all snowy due to the antenna feed being cut out by weather, and Dusty realizes it's headed right for them. Bill, who hasn't been wrong one single time in this movie yet, knows what Dusty doesn't.
It's already here.
Out of the darkness comes a behemoth of a tornado heading straight for the drive-in. I'm not really sure how they didn't hear that coming before, but whatever. Chasers and the moviegoers all get sent running for cover as the twister takes the drive-in screen just as the Here's Johnny scene plays for one of the coolest shots of the film. Although when we first saw the screen a few minutes ago, it was the twin scene in the hall. The Here's Johnny scene is at the end of the movie. We all know they haven't been here that long because The Shining's like 7 hours long. Okay, not really, but sometimes it feels like it. As they take shelter in a nearby garage, tons of debris and even cars get tossed around and into the garage, nearly killing everyone. Look at all those sparks! It's like we're in the Universal ride right now. The crew says they got off lucky because the twister just sideswiped them, but we all know what was up. If Bill would have chucked a bottle of Jack Daniels into it, it would have killed it dead to rights. It probably found out how impossible it was to kill Bill, so the tornado picks the consolation prize and heads towards Aunt Meg.
It looks to hit Wakita head on.
Before the crew leaves for Wakita, Melissa realizes that the Bill she fell in love with and the real Bill aren't really the same guy. She then says her forever goodbyes before relieving herself from the rest of the movie. Poor thing. This has just been awkward for her the whole time. They head towards Wakita, but they don't make it in time as the powerful storm hits and destroys most of the town. They manage to rescue Aunt Meg and her little dog Moles too before the house finally collapses in on itself. After loading up Meg into the ambulance, Jo finally realizes how to help Dorothy fly when she spots the lawn art Meg created still standing after the storm. This, of course, sets up more product placement for Pepsi, but you know, it's their choice.
Yes, and it's the choice of a new generation.
With the crew saddled up for the final act, the storm has grown to the point of spawning an F5, which Preacher famously nicknames the Finger of God, and they set up for their first try with the last 2 Dorothy prototypes. Bill and Jo set Dorothy out in the road hoping for the monster to take it, but before it can, a limb is tossed from the storm like a spear and takes out the instrument. One of the limbs gets tossed and lodged up under Bill's truck and leaves some sitting ducks in the middle of the road. Luckily, it's not for long though, because now that crazy twister is chucking 18 wheels and a dozen roses at that Dodge Ram. When the big rig hits the Dodge, it manages to knock it loose before tossing it back up into the air and then back down in front of the truck, causing a massive explosion. Now I know what you're all thinking. This is the most ridiculous shit you've ever seen, right? And you're probably right. It is the most ridiculous thing you've ever seen. so far. Bill and Joe spot Jonas and Eddie up the road, pulling up alongside the Twister, hoping to deploy their sensors. When Joe tries to warn them about the pack being too light and help them in the name of science, Jonas blows her off by being a complete dick. To be fair though, she was kind of a dick to him in the diner the day before, so I don't really blame him here. Bill chimes in and then tells him to get out of there because it's too close, and if the Twister decides to shift its track, they're done for. He ignores them once again, and again, Bill's right because the tornado does just that. The monster then tosses some sort of metal bracket into the windshield, killing Eddie, and lifts the rig into the air before tossing it to the ground for another explosion, killing Jonas as well. Again, the movie just switches gears all of a sudden and gets dark again. Hey, Tornado, you haven't killed any folks in a while. You want to try that out again? That'll teach you to sell out, Jonas. Bill and Joe find themselves once again being chased by the tornado as it tosses combines all over the road and even a house. Where did that shit even come from, and how did it roll into the road in almost one piece? Also, how did they go up the stairs but then out the bottom window? You know what? It doesn't matter. It's fun. It's time for a last-ditch effort to get Dorothy into the air, and this time they decide to punch the cord with it still tied to the truck. He sets the cruise control and steers it right into the Twister, and Dorothy is finally flying.
It's Christmas time!
Somebody isn't happy about this, however, and that somebody is the tornado, which is once again chasing the chasers. Bill and Joe take off on foot, somehow managing to outrun the tornado and make it to a nearby farm. Even if they could outrun this thing, which they can't, the winds, dust, and the debris would probably have taken them out. But I'm talking about them like they're normal people, and that's just wrong of me. They find a nearby pump house where they strap themselves down to the metal piping with leather belts in hopes that they have a chance of surviving the monster tornado. And yes, I know it's ludicrous. It's not just ludicrous, it's Chris ludicrous. But I mean, who are we kidding? It's Bill. They'll make it out just fine. As the core of the storm passes over them, we get to see what the inside of an F5 actually looks like, but not really, and once again they manage to avoid any major flying debris. Seems kind of peaceful in there though, I guess. Well, like all tornadoes in this movie, this big old bastard hits Bill and Joe and then just dissipates right over the top of them. The team reunites in celebration, and Bill and Joe reconcile as the camera pans out to reveal the swath of the tornado cut during its life cycle, and Respect the Wind by Van Halen plays us out to the credits. And that was Twister, released in 1996 and directed by Jan de Bont. As I've said, this movie is ridiculous. And it's easy to make fun of, and it's very cringy in places. But it is without a shadow of a doubt one of my favorite films ever, and still to this day the best disaster film. It is so fun, and it's one of the very first films I think of when I think of summer blockbuster. That and Batman 89. I watch this movie at least once or twice a year, with one of course being around storm season in the spring. And in all my years it's never got old. I do love the digital effects in this movie, I love the practical effects in this movie, and most of it still holds up fairly well. I mean, I've seen way worse out of the disaster movies that came after this. The dialogue is crazy, but it is unique, it is fun, and I think it works because of the tremendous cast that they have and how well they work together. I think being shot on location really helps this film too, and all that B-roll footage they used really helps as well, even though one of them was from Texas. For the negatives, I really don't have a whole lot to say other than what I've already said already. I do think there's some of those over-the-top Hollywood moments where it does hurt the film a little bit because those characters would have died like 20 times over. It's fun, but it's still like, Again, you can look at some of the cheesy dialogue as a negative. There are some crazy things that they say. It is over the top. It is cheesy. And, that chasing lingo stuff, some of that's, like, I don't even know how much that's actually used. Some of it's probably real, but it doesn't really matter because, these people, like I said, these characters, this cast really ties it together well. And I think that Meg scene, that dinner scene at Meg's really, really solidifies that for me. And I mean, don't take my word for it. There's a lot of people out there that love this movie and they recognize the charm of this film. I mean, many storm chasers are storm chasers now because they watched this movie as kids and inspired them to become storm chasers or meteorologists. And, that's awesome. It just definitely has that lasting appeal and that legacy and that inspiration for some. Bill Paxton was even paid tribute to by over 200 storm chasers and spotters after his death when they repositioned their GPS tractors on the spotter network over the Great Plains in the Midwest to spell out BP on the map. It's really, really cool. And that's usually an honor, I believe, that only comes to like other fallen storm chasers and spotters. There's also a cool little museum in the town of Wakita right now that's got a lot of artifacts and memorabilia from the movie. It just goes to show you that even everybody there still holds this film in high regard and still pays tribute to it. It's undeniable, and it's been really hard to capture the same magic again. Into the Storm, might be the closest thing we have, and I just didn't have the same feeling towards that one. It wasn't as good. There was a couple of old TV films in the 90s, though, that you guys should check out if you haven't. Twisters, I think it's Twister or Twisters with Bruce Campbell. I think it's Twister with an exclamation point. And Night of the Twisters with Devon Sawa and John Snyder. Really cool movie. Like that growing up a lot. You should definitely check that out if you can. So rating this movie isn't really difficult for me at all. It's a high score for me, to probably no one's surprise. I'm giving Twister an EF4 out of 5. It's just one of those movies that I will clearly have my nostalgia blinders on for, and I will refuse to take them off, because I can pop this in and waste a couple hours and never feel bad about it, just whenever. And I don't feel sorry for that. So guys, this is going to do it for me today. I don't exactly know 100% which order this is going to come out, because I'm also filming several other reviews at the same time, including my Halloween one. So I don't exactly know how I'm going to do that just yet. Just know that Halloween is coming very soon if it's not out already in this. And then I've also got a couple other little short reviews that I've done as well. So be on the lookout for those. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good jazz. And I will see you next time. Stay sane.